You know this one here, right? One of the most talked about gins in the last couple of years because of the hilarious videos with this guy here. But have you ever seen this one here, the rare Aviation American Gin, the Cask Aged Old Tom version? Probably not, because this one is a limited version made only for the US market. But hey, now this one can be used thanks to yours truly. So let's take a closer look at Aviation American Gin, at the crazy story behind the Old Tom Gin name, and how you can win this bottle. Hi guys, and welcome to High on Gin, and this third and last episode where I take a closer look at the gins that also have a cask-aged version. This time I will introduce you to the limited cask-aged version of Aviation American Gin. This one was only released in the US, but right now you have a chance to win this one here on High on Gin. Or if you want to be sure to get your own bottle, Collection Spirits here in Denmark has managed to get a few bottles, so hurry up and check out their website. But let's start it all by looking at the regular Aviation American Gin that this one here is based upon. Aviation was founded in Portland in 2006 by Christian Krogstad, who had a small distillery called House Spirits Distillery, and Ryan McGarren, who was a bartender in Seattle. They wanted to develop an American-made dry gin, lighter on the juniper flavor with a smoother finish, the so-called contemporary or New Western style type of gin. Their goal was to make a gin that would be the best gin for the American pre-prohibition cocktails, cocktails like the Aviation cocktails that the brand is named after. So to get that result, they used botanicals like juniper, coriander, two kinds of orange peel, lavender, aniseed, sarsaparilla, and cardamom. Oh. When you smell this gin here, you get these very subtle hints of floral lavender and a touch of rooty, earthy spiciness. You get the cardamom wrapped in this sweet vanilla feel. It is such a pleasant smell. The taste has character to it. The citrus notes and the alcohol is making it a bit more defined, but still with the hints of the earthy cardamom, the citrusy coriander, the peppery and almost fresh menthol-like finish to it. And then it has a slightly creamy texture to it. It might be that this gin here is made for cocktails and gin and tonics, but I love it neat, I really do. And as the distillery also does whiskeys, the guys from Aviation American Gin then took this gin here and used one of their own barrels to make a cask-aged Old Tom version out of the gin. Historically, an Old Tom gin is a sweeter style of gin that had sugar and flavoring botanicals added to it. The Old Tom variant of Aviation Gin has none of those. Instead, they have left the gin for 1 year of aging in the American white oak barrels that used to hold House Spirits whiskey for 3 to 4 years. Oh yes. The sweet barrel flavors have joined the smooth Aviation American Gin in such a fine way. It's such a perfect marriage between the whiskey, woody, vanilla flavors and the smooth gin. The result gives a touch of light juniper, I think, vanilla, citrus, as well as these floral and earthy notes with an added caramel sweetness to it. It's still very crisp and very clean, and then with this touch of sweetness. I love this one here. And as I said, the gin is both a cask-aged gin and an Old Tom gin. And if you're not familiar with the stories behind Old Tom Gin. Why it's always sweeter and why it's called Old Tom, let me give you the stories here. Old Tom Gin dates back to the 18th century and is a sweetened gin. Back in the days, the quality of gin was often very, very poor. The distillation process often didn't leave out the fusel oils, causing a very unpleasant taste. And to make a gin as cheap as possible, cheap turpentine was often used instead of juniper, as turpentine has this woody resinous taste to it that could be mistaken for juniper. So to cover up the often very suspicious taste and very, very poor quality, sweetening botanicals like licorice roots and other botanicals were added. Later on, when sugar was not as expensive as it was in the 18th century, that was added to the gin. Although Old Tom Gin hasn't got a clear definition on what to use and how to make it, it is always a more sweet gin. Something between a London dry gin and the sweeter Dutch malted grain-based spirit Genever. Today, sugar is, well, not used to cover up anything, of course, but it's only used to make the gin perfect as a sipping gin or a gin for cocktails. And the stories behind the name Old Tom are many. Some of them are more colorful than others, and here are 3 of them. One version is that following the Gin Act of 1736, where the government tried to limit the enormous consumption of alcohol, a creative young Irishman, Dudley Bradstreet, opened a secret gin shop called the Puss and Mew. Dudley had found a few interesting details in the Gin Act, one of them being that authorities had no right to break into a house if it was locked. So in the window of his secret shop, he hung a sign of a black tomcat. The deal was that the gin-craving consumers could then shout "Puss, puss" outside the illegal shop, and when they got a meow, meow as a response, they knew that they could buy gin. There was a slot under the cat's paw where money could be fed, and once they had paid, the gin would then be poured through a pipe into the waiting client's flask or even mouth. Another version of the story looks at the origin of the name Old Tom and claims that it was an old, unfortunate tomcat that fell into a vat of gin, giving the gin a distinct flavor, and that it allegedly also gave the gin its nickname Cat's Water. Well, I don't know about that one. And the third version comes from Hodges Distillery, located on what is now known as Lambeth Road in London. The distillery had a young apprentice named Tom Norris, and his mentor was master distiller Thomas Chamberlain. Young Tom, after finishing his apprenticeship, opened a gin shop around 1849 in Covent Garden, selling a gin called, well, you guessed it, Old Tom, in honor of his old master. So wherever the name came from, the fact remains that wooden plaques of shaped like black cats were hung outside gin shops and pubs in the 18th and 19th century to advertise that they were selling Old Tom Gin. But what else is true is hard to say. But I'm a sucker for a good story. So guys, there you have it, an American cask aged Old Tom Gin, a modern gin based on old history, a beautiful Art Deco inspired flask, and such a cool sipping gin. And if you want this very limited bottle of gin, go to Collection Spirits homepage and buy the bottle now before it's too late, or join my little giveaway before July 25th, 2021. You'll find more descriptions below on how to enter. And that was the last episode about Cask Aged Gins for now. I have introduced you to gins aged in a Chardonnay cask, in a sherry cask, in a cognac cask, and now in a whiskey cask, from Australia to Denmark and now to America. And I hope that you have liked my little tour. I know I have. Until next time.